Whispers before the pyre. December 1278, first night of the frost moon. The air in the dungeon was cold as a blade, piercing my bones. Frost on the stone walls glittered in the faint torchlight, as if mocking my coming fate. Outside the iron door, the prayers were a low, monotonous drone, the church's monks chanting for the purification of my soul, though the sound was more a funeral dirge. I huddled in the corner, my tattered cloak wrapped around me, trying to hold on to the last vestiges of warmth. My fingers scraped the rough stone floor, picking up damp, cold dirt, a grim omen. Tomorrow, the pyre's flames would consume me, Elise, the bastard charged with treason. I am not a traitor, at least, not the kind they accuse me of being. I am the old duke's illegitimate daughter. My mother was an unknown healer, lost to the plague the year I was born. My father never acknowledged me but allowed me to survive in the castle as a medical assistant, until I accidentally found a letter that could shake the foundations of the kingdom. Now, both the church and my father see me as a threat, eager to erase my existence with fire. There was another prisoner, a soldier with a broken leg, his groans coming in broken spurts. Dragging my heavy shackles, I moved to his side and used the last of my cloth scraps to bandage his wound. The stench of his blood mixed with the dungeon's mold, acrid yet real. I whispered a comfort, "Bear it. There's hope only if you live." He nodded weakly, but his eyes were empty. I knew tomorrow I wouldn't be able to spare a thought for him, for the bell of the pyre was tolling for me. Suddenly, the iron door shrieked open. The torchlight outside flickered, like a soul struggling in the wind. I shrank back into the corner, my heart pounding like a battle drum. The footsteps were heavy and urgent, boots on stone, the metallic clash of armor echoing in the darkness. Not the jailer, their steps were never this resolute. I held my breath, fixated on the shadow in the doorway. "Stand down." A low male voice shattered the silence, the command sharp as a knife. The jailer mumbled and retreated, the torchlight casting a tall silhouette into the cell. His armor gleamed with a cold light, and the holy knight commander's sigil shone on his chest. It was Renard, the duke's son, what? There was no name to define the relationship between us, only those passing glances in the castle's dark corridors, those silent, unacknowledged stares. He approached the iron bars, the torchlight illuminating his face, the chiseled features cold as a sculpture. His eyes, deep as a winter lake, hid an emotion I couldn't read. "Elise," he whispered my name, his voice like snow falling on pine branches, light yet heavy. "Why don't you defend yourself?" I looked up, the iron manacles chafing my wrists. "Defend myself?" I gave a dry laugh, my voice hoarse. "The church wants my life, and my father wants my silence. Who am I to defend myself to? God? Or you?" He frowned, his fingers tightening on the iron bars, his knuckles white. "Don't push me, Elise." His tone was a command, yet mixed with a tremor. "Tell me, why are you charged with treason? What exactly was in that letter?" I lowered my eyes. The torchlight cast my shadow on the stone floor, broken and distorted. The contents of the letter I couldn't reveal, not now. It was about the secret of the royal bloodline, about my father's betrayal, about the identity I might possess, a truth that could overturn the kingdom. I gritted my teeth. "Do you want to save me, or judge me, Renard?" He was silent for a moment, the torchlight dancing in his eyes like a candle about to go out in the wind. "If I save you, how will you repay me, Elise?" His voice was so low it was barely audible, yet it exploded in my heart like thunder. I froze, my throat constricted. His question wasn't a challenge, but a test, fraught with dangerous ambiguity. I stood up, my shackles clanking, moving close to the bars until only the cold iron separated us. His breath was close, carrying the faint scent of pine and leather. I whispered back, "What do you want, Renard? My loyalty, or my life?" He didn't answer, only gazed at me, his eyes like knives, cutting through all my pretense. Suddenly, he reached out, slipping his hand through the bars, his fingertips touching my cheek. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. His hand was cold, yet it burned my skin like fire. I stood rigid, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. His thumb gently wiped the dirt from my face, a touch as soft as if caressing a fragile treasure. "Don't be afraid," he whispered, his voice as gentle as the night wind, yet absolute. "I will not let you die." I gripped his wrist, trying to push him away, but found I had no strength. His palm was warm and firm, like the only anchor in the darkness. I bit my lip, holding back the sob in my throat. "By what right do you save me? You are the Duke's son, the Holy Knight Commander, and I'm just a bastard." He moved closer abruptly, the iron bars pressing against our shrinking distance, his face practically touching mine. "You are not just anything," he growled, his voice carrying an irrefutable authority. "You are Elise, he stopped, as if startled by his own words. In the distance, footsteps sounded again at the end of the dungeon, quick and chaotic. Renard quickly withdrew his hand, turning to face the darkness. His back was like a mountain, shielding me from the unknown threat. "Who is there?" he commanded, his voice like a drawn sword. A figure emerged from the shadows, the torchlight illuminating a familiar face. Cassandra, Renard's fiancée. Her golden hair was blinding in the firelight, but her eyes burned with the flame of jealousy. She sneered, her skirt brushing the ground with a faint rustle. "Renard, does your father know you are visiting a traitor late at night?" Her voice was sweet yet venomous, like a dagger coated in honey. Renard's body stiffened, but he didn't turn back. "Cassandra, return to your room." His tone was icy, carrying the weight of a command. She took a step closer, her gaze sweeping over me as if examining a filthy object. "She is a witch, Renard. She has bewitched you, just as she has bewitched the entire castle." She paused, her smile growing colder. "Or perhaps you have already betrayed your family?" A chill ran down my spine. Cassandra's appearance was no accident. She was watching, waiting for an opportunity to push me into a deeper abyss. Renard turned, standing in front of me, the firelight dancing on his armor, as if cladding him in a cold flame. "Enough," he roared, his voice echoing in the dungeon. "Elise's fate will be decided by me." Cassandra's smile froze, but she did not retreat. She backed away slowly, her skirt trailing on the stone floor, like the track of a serpent. "Very well, Renard," she whispered, her voice like a venomous hiss. "But don't forget, the church's eyes are everywhere." She vanished into the darkness, her footsteps fading, leaving only the crackle of the torch and the pounding of my heart. Renard turned back, his gaze falling on me again, so complex it stole my breath. "Tomorrow, I'll see you at the tribunal," he said, his voice low as a vow. "Don't give up, Elise." He turned and left, the torchlight receding with him, and the dungeon returned to darkness. I slid down the stone wall, my fingers touching the spot where he had touched me, my skin still retaining his warmth. Tomorrow, I would face the threat of the pyre, and Renard, would he be my salvation, or my destruction? Roar in the tribunal. December 1278, second day of the frost moon. The chill of the tribunal hall was more biting than the dungeon. Stone pillars towered like silent giants, supporting the vaulted ceiling carved with statues of the gods, their stone eyes coldly overlooking me, as if my guilt had long been pronounced. Flames in the braziers crackled, casting long shadows that writhed on the polished stone floor, mirroring the turmoil in my heart. My heavy shackles dragged at my ankles, clanking, each step a descent into the abyss of fate. I, Elise, the Duke's bastard, the accused traitor healer, was to be judged today under the eyes of the church and the kingdom. The hall was packed, the rustle of noble silks and the clank of knights' armor mixing, the whispers like venomous hisses. The church's crimson banner fluttered slightly in the breeze, like a curtain woven of blood. Judge Victor stood on the dais, his black robes draped over his gaunt frame, his eyes flashing with a mix of piety and ambition. His voice was low and icy, like a curse from hell. Elise, traitor, heretic, which who has seduced others, today you will pay for your crimes. I raised my head, forcing myself to look straight at him. My throat was dry. The warmth left by Renard's touch last night had long dissipated, but I could still feel that warmth struggling within me, like a candle flickering in the wind. I am innocent, I said softly, my voice echoing in the vast hall, faint yet firm. You seek not the truth, but a sacrifice. A burst of murmuring erupted in the crowd. Nobles exchanged whispers, their eyes full of scorn and curiosity. Victor's lips curved into a cold smile. He raised the parchment in his hand and read the charges. You stole kingdom secrets, colluded with the enemy, and bewitched the holy knight commander Renard, intending to subvert the holy order. His voice was like thunder, crushing the air out of me. I gritted my teeth, my hands clenched into fists, fingernails digging into my palms. The letter about my parentage, the secret of the royal bloodline was the root of my treason charge. I could not speak of it, not now. To reveal the truth would drag Renard down into the abyss with me. I scanned the hall, searching for him. He stood at the back of the crowd, his armor gleaming in the firelight, the holy knight commander's sigil like a cold star. His gaze was locked on me, deep as a winter night, yet hiding a flame I couldn't read. Suddenly, a roar tore through the hall's stillness. Enough. The old duke, Renard's father, rose, his scarlet cloak billowing like an angry flame. His face was contorted with fury, his eyes burning with hatred for me. This bastard has stained the honor of the family. He pointed at me, his voice like a war drum. She is a traitor, a disgrace. Burn her, let her crimes be purified in the flames. The crowd erupted, cries swelling like a tide. I felt my body tremble, not from fear, but from the familiar humiliation. For years, I had survived in the castle's shadows, enduring his cold glances and insults. Now, he sought to completely erase my existence with fire. I whispered, Father, have you ever shed a single tear for me? My voice was too light, lost in the clamor, but Renard heard it. His figure strode out from the crowd, his steps as firm as a warhorse's hooves. The metallic clash of his armor echoed in the hall, suppressing all noise. He stood beside me, shielding me from the gazes of Victor and the old duke. His voice was low but intensely penetrating. Father, silence. She is my queen. The hall instantly fell into a dead silence, as if time had frozen. The nobles' whispers ceased abruptly, even the flames in the braziers seemed to hold their breath. My heart pounded like thunder, shock and terror intertwined. His queen? I, a bastard, a healer accused of treason? His words were like a sword, slicing through the hall's hypocrisy, and piercing my soul. The old duke's face turned crimson. He slammed his hand on the stone table, making the brazier shake. Renard, are you mad? He roared, his voice echoing like thunder in the hall. You betray your family for this wench? Betray your fiancé? Cassandra slowly rose, her golden hair like molten gold in the firelight, her eyes flashing with a viperous coldness. Her voice was sweet yet sharp, like a knife slicing silk. Renard, do you know what you are doing? She is a witch who has bewitched your heart. She turned to Victor, her skirt brushing the ground with a faint rustle. Judge, the holy knight commander's words and actions prove he has been deceived. The church must act. A gleam of triumph flashed in Victor's eyes. He nodded slowly. Holy knight commander, your loyalty is now in question. Elise, confess your crimes, and perhaps your soul can be saved. A chill ran down my spine. Cassandra's plot surged like a dark current. She sought not only to destroy me but to drag Renard down. I looked at him. His profile in the firelight was cold as a sculpture, yet his eyes burned with anger. He spun to face Victor, his voice like ice. She is innocent. If you want her life, you'll have to go through me first. A gasp erupted in the crowd. Knights gripped their sword hilts, and church guards laid hands on their weapons. The atmosphere was like a taut bowstring, ready to snap. My heart threatened to burst from my chest. Renard's hand lightly touched my arm. Through the cold of the shackles, his fingertips brought a warmth. In that moment, I felt as if I was pulled out of the abyss, his touch a vow, firm and fiery. Renard, stop. The old Duke rushed forward, trying to pull him away, but Renard was immovable. His gaze locked on me. He whispered, Elise, tell me the truth. I can save you. I bit my lip, my throat choked. The truth? The letter was hidden inside my cloak, pressed against my skin, like a burning brand. It could prove my bloodline, but it would also make Renard a target. I whispered back, if you fight for me, you will lose everything. He didn't answer, only tightened his grip on my arm, the force nearly causing me pain. A look of fierce resolve flashed in his eyes, like a candle about to be extinguished in the wind, burning with all its might. I would rather lose everything than lose you. His voice was so low only I could hear it, but it exploded in my heart like thunder. Victor violently struck the gavel, the sound like a death knell. Enough. Renard, you will be judged with her. He turned to the guards, escort them both back to the dungeon, to await the church's decree. The guards advanced, the clanking of their armor like the low growl before a storm. I was dragged towards the dark door at the end of the hall. 2 knights restrained Renard, his armor screeching in their struggle. I turned back to look at him. His gaze pierced the crowd, still locked on me, like a lighthouse in the darkness. Cassandra stood beside the old Duke, a victorious smile playing on her lips. She whispered to Victor. The first couldn't hear the content, but her eyes were like a snake's, foreshadowing a greater plot. The flames in the brazier danced behind her, as if crowning her betrayal. The moment the dark door closed, darkness swallowed everything. I was shoved back into the dungeon, the cold stone walls embracing me again. Renard's words echoed in my ears, she is my queen. He fought his father for me, fought the church, but could he fight fate? And should I reveal the secret of that letter, even if it pushes us into a deeper abyss? Conspiracy in the Snow Night. December 1278, 3rd night of the frost moon. Snowflakes like knives cut through the night's silence. I pressed close behind Renard, my arms around his waist, my cheek against his cold armor, feeling the rhythm of the galloping horse vibrating through the snow. The fierce wind howled, tearing at my cloak, and snowflakes drove down my collar, stinging my skin. The dark shadows of the pine forest swayed around us like countless pairs of prying eyes, reminding me that the church's pursuit could appear at any moment. Renard was silent, his hand on the reins steady as a rock, but his back exuded a desperate resolve. Hours earlier, he had stormed the dungeon, severed my shackles, and snatched me from the shadow of the tribunal. In that instant, his eyes were like flames, burning away my fear. Come with me, Elise, he growled, his voice brooking no argument, or we will both die in their fire. I did not hesitate, for in that moment, I knew I would follow him wherever he led, even if it was to hell. The warhorse traversed the snowy woods, its hooves muffled by the thick snow, leaving only the low moan of the wind and the cry of a distant owl. Renard finally reined in the horse, bringing me to a cabin hidden in the woods. Outside, pine branches sagged low under the weight of the snow, like a mourning curtain drawn over our escape. Inside, a solitary lamp flickered on the table, casting fragmented shadows on the wooden walls, as if foretelling our fragile destiny. My cloak was soaked, the cold cloth clinging to my skin like a second set of chains. Renard took off his own mantle and draped it over my shoulders. His fingers brushed my neck, warm as spring, brief yet enough to send my heart racing. "Sit down, warm yourself." His voice was deep, a command, yet laced with a hint of tenderness. He lit the fireplace, the flames danced, illuminating his chiseled profile. His armor was soaked with snowmelt, the holy night sigil on his chest glinting coldly in the firelight, a reminder of his broken vows. I huddled by the fire, clutching his mantle, inhaling the faint scent of leather and pine. The letter was still hidden in the lining of my cloak, pressed against my chest, like a kindling that could ignite at any moment. I knew Renard was waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to explain the secret of that letter, why the church and his father were so eager to see me dead. But revealing the truth meant dragging him into a greater abyss, a secret concerning the royal bloodline, a truth that could overturn the kingdom. "Why don't you ask?" I finally spoke, my voice hoarse, as if squeezed from deep within my throat. The firelight danced in my eyes, reflecting his tall and solitary figure. He turned, a complex emotion flashing in his eyes, a mix of anger and tenderness. "Ask what?" "Your crime, or your silence." He walked toward me, each step echoing heavily on the wooden floor. "Elise, I betrayed my family for you, betrayed the church for you. The least you can do is tell me why." I bit my lip, feeling the weight of the letter pressing down on my heart like a mountain. His gaze was like a knife, cutting through my defenses. I stood up, my cloak slipping to the floor, revealing my ragged linen dress, stained with dungeon grime. "You want the truth?" I whispered, my voice trembling but firm. "That letter, it could destroy your father, and it could destroy you." He moved closer abruptly, the distance so near I could feel his breath, warm and rapid, carrying the chill of the snowy night. "Destroy me?" He scoffed, his voice like ice. "Elise, I am already destroyed. From the moment I drew my sword to save you, I was no longer the holy knight commander, no longer the duke's son." He paused, a flicker of pain in his eyes. "Tonight, you belong only to me, Elise." His words were like thunder, nearly stopping my breath. I stepped back, my back against the wooden wall, the rough grain stinging my skin. His figure overshadowed me, like an insurmountable mountain. I wanted to push him away but found myself powerless. His hand lifted, gently cupping my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. Those eyes, deep as a winter lake, held a heat I could not bear. "Don't push me, Renard," I whispered, my voice almost broken. "You don't understand the cost of that letter." He didn't release me, but moved closer, his nose almost touching my forehead. His voice was low, like a whisper, yet carried an irresistible force. "I don't care about the cost. I only care about you." His fingers slid to my cheek, wiping away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. The firelight of the fireplace flickered between us, as if crowning this forbidden passion. I closed my eyes, trying to quell the storm in my heart. The truth struggled on my lips, but I could only utter half of it. "That letter, it proves I am not a common bastard." I paused, my throat constricted. "It says, I might be of the royal bloodline." Renard's body stiffened, his fingers frozen on my cheek. His gaze changed, from fiery passion to shock, then to a dangerous resolve. "Royal," he growled, his voice like a candle about to go out in the wind. "Are you saying, you are a threat to the throne?" I nodded, tears falling again, scalding my cheek. "My father knows, the church knows, that is why they want me dead." I grasped his wrist, the force almost painful. "Renard, if you keep helping me, you will become their enemy." He was silent for a moment, the firelight dancing in his eyes, as if burning his soul. Suddenly, he pulled me into a fierce embrace, the force taking my breath away. His armor was cold, stinging my skin, but his embrace was so warm I wanted to sink into it. "Let me become their enemy," he whispered, his voice a vow, heavy and firm. "Elise, I would rather face the entire kingdom than let you face the flames alone." My heart threatened to burst from my chest. His words were like a raging fire, burning down all my defenses. I wanted to push him away, but found myself clinging tightly to his mantle, my fingers digging into the rough fabric. His breath ghosted over my forehead, carrying the scent of pine and snow, like a forbidden invitation. I closed my eyes, trying to clear my head, but his presence was a tide, engulfing me. Suddenly, a strange noise came from outside the cabin, the muffled sound of hooves stepping on snow, mixed with the faint echo of metal clashing. I snapped my eyes open. Renard also froze, releasing me and turning to draw his sword. The blade glinted coldly in the firelight, like a fissure in the night sky. "Stay here," he growled, his voice returning to the Knight Commander's authority. "Don't make a sound." He pushed open the wooden door. Snowflakes swirled in with the wind, extinguishing the solitary lamp on the table. Darkness instantly swallowed the room. The firelight from the hearth became our only anchor. I shrank into the corner, my heart pounding, clutching the letter inside my cloak. The sounds outside grew closer: hooves, footsteps, and low whispers like the church's pursuit, or worse, Cassandra's spies. Renard's figure vanished into the snowy night, the flash of his sword a momentary streak in the darkness. I held my breath, hearing only the howling wind and the crackle of the flames. Suddenly, a sharp clash of metal sliced the night air, followed by Renard's low roar. "Who dares follow us?" His voice was like thunder, carrying a deadly intent. I rushed to the window, peering through a narrow gap. Amidst the swirling snow, Renard stood with his sword drawn, fighting two masked figures. Their cloaks were embroidered with the church's red cross. The torchlight illuminated their cold faces. My heart sank. Cassandra's plot was swifter than I had imagined. She wanted not only my life but Renard's loyalty. The fight unfolded in the snow, sword glints like lightning, the snow kicked up like broken stars. Renard's movements were agile and deadly, but fighting two opponents, he gradually showed signs of fatigue. I gripped the letter tightly, my nails digging into my palm. Telling him the whole truth might strengthen his resolve to fight, but if he was captured, the truth would be his death warrant. What should I do? The cabin door suddenly burst open. The cold wind rushed in, making the firelight flicker and nearly die. Renard stumbled inside, blood seeping from his shoulder, staining his armor dark red. He slammed the door shut, leaning against it, gasping for breath, his sword still tightly grasped. "They ran," he said softly, his voice hoarse, "but they'll be back, with more men." He looked at me, a mix of pain and resolve in his eyes. "Elise, we don't have much time." He walked toward me, his steps unsteady, yet still possessing an unshakable strength. "Tell me, will you go all the way with me?" I froze. The cold of the snowy night and the warmth of the hearth battled within me. His blood dripped onto the wooden floor, like a countdown to destiny. I held the letter, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Renard, I will go with you, even if it is to death." He smiled, a child's smile, yet tears glistened in his eyes. He reached out and took my hand, his blood staining my fingers. His voice was low, like a vow, "That is enough. Tonight, we either live, or we die together in this snow forest." Outside the door, the wind began to fade, but the sound of hooves sounded again, distant and urgent, like the footsteps of death. Renard gripped his sword, his gaze fixed on the door. My heart almost stopped. We might escape tonight, but we couldn't escape the pursuit of fate. Would the secret of that letter be our final salvation, or our ultimate destruction? Vows in the firelight. December 1278, fourth night of the frost moon. The candlelight in the cabin flickered like a lone soul, casting our broken shadows dancing on the rough wooden walls. The fireplace embers hummed, emitting a weak warmth that failed to ward off the snowy draft seeping through the door crack. The wind, sharp as a blade, stung my cheek, reminding me that the church's pursuit could smash down the door at any moment. Renard stood by the window, his sword still in his hand, the blood on his shoulder congealed to a dark red, saturating his armor. His back was like a mountain, shielding me from the darkness outside, but I knew that mountain could collapse at any time. The previous night's fight was brief but perilous. He fought 2 men and drove back Cassandra's spies, but the cost was that deep, bone-close wound. I sat by the fireplace, my fingers clutching a strip of cloth torn from my cloak, carrying the bitter scent of herbs, the last vestige of hope I had brought from the dungeon. I whispered, "Renard, sit down. Let me look at your wound." He turned, the firelight illuminating his face, his chiseled profile like a sculpture, yet his eyes held weariness and obstinacy. "No need," he said coldly, his voice carrying the authority of the holy knight. "I can endure." But his steps were slightly unsteady, and the slight scrape of his armor as he leaned against the wooden wall betrayed his weakness. I stood up, my cloak slipping to the floor, revealing my ragged linen dress, stained with snow and grime. I walked toward him, each step making the wooden floor creak, as if fate were whispering. "Don't be stubborn," I said softly, my tone gentle yet insistent. "You bled for me. At least let me repay you with this kindness." He frowned, his gaze like a knife, cutting through my pretense. "Kindness?" he scoffed, his voice deep as thunder. "Elise, I don't want your kindness. I want your truth." His eyes locked onto mine, as if they could pierce my soul and reach the letter hidden inside my cloak, the secret of the royal bloodline, the truth that made me a thorn in the side of the church and the old duke. I bit my lip, feeling the weight of the letter press down on my heart. I wanted to tell him everything, yet feared the truth would push him into a deeper abyss. I whispered, "Sit down, Renard. Let me save you first, then we can talk about the truth." He was silent for a moment, a struggle flashing in his eyes, before finally conceding. He slid down, leaning against the wooden wall, his armor hitting the floor with a dull thud. I knelt beside him, unfastening the clasps of his shoulder plate. The smell of blood assailed me, mixed with the scent of rust and pine. His wound was ragged, the flesh torn open like a fissure in the snow. I dipped the cloth strip in the herbs and gently pressed it onto the wound. He let out a suppressed groan, his body trembling, but he did not pull away. "Does it hurt?" I asked softly, my fingers carefully wiping away the blood. His skin was burning hot, as if concealing an unextinguished fire. "Compared to the pain of losing you, this is nothing." His voice was so low it was almost inaudible, yet it exploded in my heart like thunder. My hand trembled, and the herbs fell to the floor, the candlelight casting their shadow on the wood, an image of our fate flickering, fragile, ready to be extinguished at any moment. I looked up, meeting his eyes. Those eyes, deep as a winter lake, held an unbearable intensity. "Renard, why are you doing this for me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am a bastard, a traitor, the church's sacrifice. You are the holy knight commander, the duke's son. You deserve a better future." He abruptly grabbed my wrist, his grip so tight I could barely breathe. His fingers were cold, yet burned my skin like fire. "A better future," he growled, his voice like a candle about to go out in the wind. "Elise, a future without you means nothing to me." His gaze cut through my defenses. "From the first time I saw you in the castle's dark corridors, your eyes made me unable to escape. You are my curse, and my salvation." My heart threatened to burst from my chest. His words were a raging fire, incinerating all my reason. I wanted to push him away, but found myself clutching his hand, my nails digging into his skin, leaving shallow marks. The candlelight danced between us, as if consecrating this forbidden love. I whispered, Renard, if you fight for me, you will lose everything, your family, your honor, your fiancé. He laughed, a boyish laugh, yet tears glistened in his eyes. Cassandra, he scoffed, a hint of contempt in his voice. She wants the Duke's title, not me. And I. He paused, his voice low as a vow, I only want you. Time seemed to stand still. The firelight reflected on our faces, warm and dangerous. I felt tears roll down, scalding my cheeks. I released his hand, stood up, and turned my back to the candlelight, trying to compose myself. But his presence was a tide, overwhelming me. I whispered, Renard, that letter, it says I am of the royal bloodline. My father knows, the church knows, that is why they want me dead. He stood up abruptly, the pain from his wound making him wince, but he still advanced toward me, his steps as firm as a warhorse's hooves. Royal bloodline? His voice was deep, laced with shock and resolve. Are you saying, you are the heir to the throne? I nodded, my vision blurred by tears. That letter was left by my mother, hidden in the castle's secret chamber. The moment I found it, my father sent me to the dungeon. I took a deep breath, my voice almost broken. Renard, if you keep helping me, you will become the enemy of the kingdom. He was silent for a moment, the candlelight dancing in his eyes, as if consuming his soul. Suddenly, he stepped forward and pulled me into his arms. His armor was cold, stinging my skin, but his embrace was so warm I wanted to drown in it. Let me become their enemy, he whispered, his voice a vow, heavy and firm. Elise, I would rather face the entire kingdom than let you face the flames alone. My body trembled. Tears fell, dripping onto his armor, like snow melting in a raging fire. His hand slid to my cheek, gently wiping away the tears, a touch as soft as if caressing a fragile treasure. I closed my eyes, feeling his breath on my forehead, carrying the scent of pine and blood. Just then, his lips touched mine, warm and urgent, like a spark ignited in the darkness. That kiss, forbidden and fiery, was our challenge to fate, our betrayal of the church. The candlelight flickered, the fire in the hearth hummed low, as if accompanying our vow. But suddenly, a heavy knock on the door shattered the intimacy, like the whispered word of death. Renard abruptly pulled away, turned, and drew his sword, the blade glinting coldly in the candlelight. Who is it? He growled, his voice like thunder, laced with deadly intent. The knock sounded again, urgent and heavy, like the drumming before a storm. I shrank into the corner, my heart pounding, clutching the letter inside my cloak. Renard walked to the door, his back a mountain, shielding me from the unknown threat. He said softly, hide. Don't make a sound. He pushed open the door. The snowy wind rushed in, almost extinguishing the candle. Standing outside was a masked figure, a red cross embroidered on his cloak. The torchlight illuminated his cold face. Renard, the man said softly, his voice like a snake's hiss. The church knows you are here. Hand her over, or you will burn with her. Renard gripped his sword, his body blocking the doorway like an insurmountable barrier. Go back and tell Victor, he said coldly, his voice like ice. Elise is mine. Anyone who dares touch her will have to go through me first. The man sneered, the torchlight dancing in his eyes, like the devil's mockery. You will regret this, holy night. He retreated into the snowy night. His footsteps were swallowed by the wind and snow, but his threat was like a cold blade, piercing my heart. Renard closed the door and turned to look at me. His shoulder was bleeding again, staining the wooden floor, like fate's countdown. His gaze was complex, holding both tenderness and fierce resolve. If I die for you, will you remember me? His voice was low, squeezed from the depths of his soul, piercing my heart. I rushed to him, grabbing his arm, tears falling again. Don't talk like that, I growled, my voice almost broken. Renard, you won't die. Neither of us will. But my words failed to convince even myself. Outside the door, the wind and snow grew fiercer, and the faint sound of hooves was carried on the air, like the approaching footsteps of death. He smiled, a heartbreakingly gentle smile. He raised his hand, gently stroking my cheek, his blood staining my skin. Elise, no matter what happens tonight, you are my queen. His voice was like the candlelight, faint yet fiery, igniting both hope and fear in my heart. The knock on the door sounded again, urgent and violent, like fate's final ultimatum. Renard gripped his sword, his gaze fixed on the door. My heart nearly stopped. The church's pursuit had arrived. Could our vow withstand the storm that was about to break? The Iron Hand of the Church. December 1278, 5th day of the frost moon. The dungeon's cold clutched my bones like an iron claw. Frost crystallized on the stone walls, glittering in the faint torchlight, a mocking reflection of my brief freedom. The iron shackles once more locked my wrists, heavy as a curse of fate, clanking with every movement, each sound reminding me, the snowy night of escape was a phantom, and I was back in the church's cage. The warmth of the fireplace, Renard's vows, the kiss and the candlelight, all of it was torn to shreds by yesterday's pursuit, scattered fragments on the snow. When the church's guards burst into the cabin, Renard fought with desperate fury. His sword flashed like lightning, piercing the snowy night, but he was overwhelmed. The Red Cross guards swarmed him like wolves, subduing him and dragging me back to this cold abyss. I was shoved into the cell. The iron door slammed shut, its echo reverberating through the hall like a funeral bell tolling for my hopes. The letter inside my cloak still pressed against my chest, a burning brand, reminding me of the unspoken secret, the evidence of my royal bloodline, a truth capable of toppling the kingdom. The air in the cell was damp and acrid, mixed with mold and blood. In the corner, a solitary lamp flickered, casting distorted shadows on the stone walls, like the church's judging eyes, watching my every move. I huddled on the straw heap, trying to retain the last warmth in my body. Where was Renard? Where had they taken him? His shoulder was still bleeding. Could he endure the double wrath of the church and his father? My heart twisted in agony. Tears fell, only to be swallowed by the cold stone floor. Suddenly, footsteps outside the iron door broke the deadly silence. Heavy and slow, not the shuffle of the jailer, but a pace of unquestionable authority. I held my breath, focusing on the torchlight seeping through the crack. The door opened, and Judge Victor entered. His black robe was like the wings of night, the crimson church sigil shining on his chest like a drop of congealed blood. His gaze was icy, seemingly capable of piercing my soul, yet a knowing sneer played on his lips. Elise, his voice was low, like a curse, a mix of piety and venom. Did you truly believe escape could save you from divine judgment? He walked slowly toward me, his boots echoing heavily on the stone floor. Renard betrayed the church for you, broke his vows. Do you know how precarious his soul's standing is? I bit down hard, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Renard's choices have nothing to do with me. My voice was hoarse, but held a thread of defiance. You want my life? Why involve him? Victor sneered, the firelight dancing in his eyes like a devil's mockery. Nothing to do with you? He pulled a parchment scroll from his robe, slowly unfurling it, the ink looking like blood. This secret document proves you colluded with the enemy and bewitched the Holy Knight Commander. You are not only a traitor, but a witch, Elise. He paused, his voice growing colder. Unless you confess, Renard will be judged alongside you. My heart sank. That letter, my letter, was still hidden inside my cloak. The one in Victor's hand was merely the church's fabricated evidence. But his threat was a cold blade, stabbing my heart. Renard fought for me, betrayed his family for me. If I remained silent, he would be dragged deeper into the abyss. I whispered, "What do you want, Victor? My life, or my surrender?" He moved closer, the torchlight casting a ghastly shadow on his gaunt face, like the mask of death. "I want the truth," he murmured, his voice a serpent's hiss. "Where is the letter? What does it say? Confess, Elise, and perhaps I can still spare your life." A chill ran down my spine. His gaze was like a knife, trying to dissect my soul. I gripped my cloak, my fingers touching the outline of the letter. In that moment, I wanted to tear it up, to bury the truth forever, but Renard's face flashed in my mind, his vow, his kiss, his blood. I could not let him pay the price for my silence. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside the cell, the clash of metal and low growls mixing, like the low roar before a storm. Victor spun around, his gaze fixed on the iron door. The door opened, and Cassandra swept in. Her golden hair shimmered like molten gold in the torchlight, her skirt sweeping the ground with a slight rustle, like the trace of a serpent. Her eyes burned with jealousy, yet a victorious smile played on her lips. "Lord Victor," she said sweetly, her voice hiding venom. "I have something to tell you, concerning Renard's betrayal." My heart sank. Cassandra's appearance was a dark current, stirring up a greater conspiracy. She turned to me, her gaze like a knife, piercing my defenses. "Elise, do you truly believe Renard loves you?" She sneered, her voice like ice. "He was merely bewitched by your sorcery. Once he is purged, he will personally lead you to the pyre." Silence. I sprang to my feet, my shackles clanking, the sound echoing in the cell. "You are jealous of me, Cassandra, but you cannot change his heart." She laughed, a proud and cruel sound. "His heart?" She moved closer, her skirt swaying in the firelight, like a scarlet flame. "Renard has been placed under house arrest, by the Duke's personal order. He is now the Church's prisoner, and you are merely a lure." My body trembled, as if pierced by the cold wind. Renard under arrest? His father, the iron-fisted Duke, so ruthless? I looked at Victor, a glint of triumph flashed in his eyes, as if savoring the torment. "Cassandra is correct," he said slowly. "Renard betrayed his family, betrayed the Church. His fate depends on your choice, Elise." I felt tears slide down, scalding my cheek like drops of hot wax. I whispered, "What do you want me to do?" Victor approached, the firelight casting a monstrous shadow on his face. "Hand over the letter," he roared, his voice like thunder. "Otherwise, Renard will burn with you." My heart nearly stopped. That letter was my last defense, Renard's only hope. To surrender it meant the Church would use it to consolidate power and erase my existence. To hide it meant Renard would pay the ultimate price for my silence. I closed my eyes, Renard's embrace in the snowy night flashing in my mind, his vow like candlelight, faint yet fiery. Suddenly, a slight rustle came from the depths of the cell, like something falling. I opened my eyes and saw a small piece of parchment slide out from the straw heap, a corner revealing familiar ink, a fragment of the letter. It must have slipped out of my cloak during yesterday's struggle. I lunged for it, trying to cover it with my body, but Victor's gaze was already fixed on the paper. A cold sneer played on his lips. "It seems you were hiding something, Elise." He bent to pick up the fragment. The firelight illuminated the writing, a piece referencing the royal bloodline, enough for him to understand everything. My heart plummeted. Tears blurred my vision. "No!" I screamed, lunging for him, the shackles restricting my movement, dragging me to the floor. Cassandra laughed coldly, her skirt sweeping the ground like a blood curtain. "Did you think you could save her?" She turned to Victor, her voice sweet yet poisonous. "Renard has been bewitched, Lord Victor. The Church must purge all traitors." Victor clenched the paper fragment in his hand, his gaze like a knife aimed at me. Elise, you have one last chance, he whispered, his voice like death's low sigh. Hand over the complete letter, or Renard will pay the price for your silence. I slumped onto the floor, the straw pricking my skin, like fate's mockery. A corner of the letter's secret was exposed, Renard's fate hanging by a thread. I looked up, my eyes seeking hope in the darkness through the firelight. Suddenly, a low crash sounded outside the cell, as if an iron door had been broken open. The shouts of guards and the clash of metal mingled, chaos surging toward us like a tide. Renard. I gasped, my voice almost drowned by my own heartbeat. Was he here? Or was this another of the church's traps? Victor spun around. Cassandra's smile froze. The firelight flickered, foreshadowing the coming storm. I gripped my cloak. The remaining letter still clung to my chest, like my last hope. In the confusion, a figure burst into the cell, armor gleaming in the firelight. Renard. His shoulder was still bleeding, but his eyes burned with fury. He stood with his sword drawn, blocking the space between me and Victor, his voice like thunder. Release her, Victor, or you will not see the sun rise tomorrow. Victor sneered, clutching the paper fragment, as if holding our destiny. Did you think you could save her? He roared, his voice like ice. She has already betrayed you, Renard. Look at this letter. She is a threat to the throne. Renard's gaze swept to me, a flicker of shock in his eyes, but it quickly turned to fierce resolve. He stepped forward, his sword tip pointed at Victor. Her destiny, I shall guard. His voice was low and firm, both a vow to me and a challenge to the church. Cassandra shrieked, seize him. Guards flooded in. The clash of swords and firelight mingled, chaos engulfing everything. I lunged toward Renard, trying to grab him, but the shackles dragged me back to the floor. His figure swayed amidst the encircling guards. Blood dripped onto the stone, like red plum blossoms on snow. Renard. I screamed, my voice tearing my throat. Victor clutched the paper fragment and retreated toward a dark door. Cassandra's laughter echoed like a serpent's hiss in my ears. I struggled to stand, the letter's weight burning on my chest. Should I hand it over, or continue to hide it, even if it meant our mutual destruction? The Broken Mirror. December 1278, 6th night of the frost moon. The dungeon's cold was like a venomous snake, coiling around my bones. A shabby copper mirror hung on the stone wall, its surface riddled with cracks, reflecting my distorted image like my shattered fate. The torchlight danced on the mirror, casting dappled light and shadow, as if mocking my helplessness. My wrists were locked by shackles, clanking, each sound like the church's judgment bell, reminding me that Renard's blood and vow were consumed by the chaos of last night. The letter fragment was snatched by Victor, but the complete letter still rested inside my cloak, pressed against my chest, like a kindling ready to ignite. Last night, Renard rushed into the cell, attempting to save me again. His sword flashed like lightning, cutting through the darkness, but the church guards swarmed him, dragging him to a deeper prison. Cassandra's laughter was a serpent's hiss. Victor's fragment was a blade stabbing our hope. I slumped onto the straw, gripping my cloak, trying to retain the warmth Renard left behind. His touch, his vow, his blood. But now, the silence of the cell was like death's whisper, leaving only my pale face in the copper mirror, like a ghost already condemned to the pyre. The letter's secret burned in my heart, the evidence of my royal bloodline, enough to shake the power of the church and the old duke. My mother's handwriting appeared in my mind. She was once a royal maid, who had a forbidden romance with a prince. I was the fruit of that love. The old duke, my father, covered up the truth, sent my mother to the wilderness, and branded me a bastard. Now, both the church and my father were eager to erase my existence, because my bloodline threatened their crown. Footsteps sounded outside the cell, heavy and urgent, mixed with the clash of metal. I held my breath, my eyes fixed on the iron door. The door opened. Victor entered, his black robe like the wings of night, the crimson church sigil shining in the firelight like a drop of congealed blood. He clutched the letter fragment seized last night, his eyes glittering with ambition. Elise, his voice was low, like a curse, carrying an icy pressure. This fragment is enough to prove your guilt. Hand over the complete letter, or Renard will pay the price for your silence. I bit my lip, my nails digging into my palm, the scent of blood mixing with the dungeon's mold, acrid yet real. You already have what you want, I said softly, my voice hoarse yet unyielding. Why won't you let him go? Victor sneered, walking slowly toward me, his boots echoing heavily on the stone floor. Let him go? He held the letter fragment up to the firelight, the writing barely visible through the cracks. This is only the beginning, Elise. Your bloodline is the kingdom's cancer, and Renard is your accomplice. The church will not tolerate any threat. A chill ran down my spine. His gaze was like a knife, trying to dissect my soul. I gripped my cloak, my fingers touching the outline of the complete letter. In that moment, I wanted to tear it up, to bury the truth forever, but Renard's face flashed in my mind, his vow, his kiss, his blood. I could not let him sacrifice himself for my silence. Suddenly, a low crash sounded outside the cell, as if the castle's stone wall had been broken open. Victor spun around, his gaze fixed on the darkness. Chaotic footsteps and shouts mingled, like the low roar before a storm. My heart pounded. Only one name filled my mind, Renard. Was he here? Or was this another of the church's traps? The door burst open. Renard rushed in. His armor was stained with blood and grime, the wound on his shoulder still seeping, staining the holy night sigil. His eyes burned with fury and resolve. His sword was in his hand, the blade glinting coldly in the firelight. Victor, release her, he roared, his voice like thunder, making the copper mirror tremble, the cracks seeming to deepen. Victor sneered, clutching the letter fragment, as if holding our destiny. You came at the perfect time, Renard, he said slowly, his voice like a serpent's hiss. Look what your queen was hiding. She is a threat to the throne, and you are her accomplice. Renard's gaze swept to me, a flicker of shock in his eyes, but it quickly hardened to resolve. He stepped forward, his sword tip pointed at Victor. Her destiny, I shall guard. His voice was low as a vow, a promise to me, and a challenge to the church. If you harm a single hair on her head, I will ensure you don't see tomorrow's sun. My heart lurched, tears fell, scalding my cheek like drops of wax. I struggled to stand, the shackles dragging me, but Renard lunged to my side, cutting my manacles with a single stroke. The sound of the chains hitting the floor was like thunder, shattering the cell's silence. His hand gripped my arm, warm and firm, like a lighthouse in the darkness. Elise, don't be afraid, he whispered, his voice gentle yet absolute. I am here. I grabbed his wrist, my nails digging into his skin, leaving shallow marks. The scent of his blood mixed with pine, acrid yet comforting. Renard, you shouldn't have come, I whispered, my voice almost broken. They will kill you. He smiled, a tragic, gentle smile. And what if they do? He roared, his eyes like fire, consuming my fear. Elise, as long as you live, I fear nothing. Victor's laughter broke our moment, cold and grating. Such touching vows, he mocked, holding up the letter fragment. But Renard, do you know what she is hiding? She is the royal bastard, the cancer that will topple the kingdom. Do you still dare to fight for her? Renard's body tensed, but he did not release me. His gaze turned to me, so complex it stole my breath. Is it true, Elise? He asked softly, a hint of pain in his voice. Are you truly of the royal bloodline? I bit my lip, tears blurring my vision. My reflection in the copper mirror was twisted and broken, like my heart. I whispered, yes, Renard. That letter, it proves my mother had an affair with the royals. I am their shame, and their threat. He was silent for a moment, his eyes flashing with shock, pain, and fierce resolve. Suddenly, he pulled me into a fierce embrace, the force taking my breath away. His armor was cold, stinging my skin, but his embrace was so warm I wanted to sink into it. "You are my queen," he whispered, his voice a vow, heavy and firm. "No matter your bloodline, I will fight for you." A gleam of triumph flashed in Victor's eyes. He slowly backed away, clutching the letter fragment. "You will regret this, Renard," he said coldly. "The church will not tolerate traitors." He turned toward the door, shouting, "Guards! Seize them!" Guards rushed and the clash of swords and firelight mingled, chaos surging like a tide. Renard shielded me behind him, his blade cutting a cold arc, blocking the approaching guards. His shoulder was bleeding profusely, dripping onto the stone floor, like red plum blossoms on snow. I lunged for him, trying to grab his arm, but his figure swayed amidst the attackers, like a candle in the wind. Suddenly, Cassandra appeared in the doorway, her golden hair like molten gold in the firelight, her eyes burning with the fire of jealousy. "Renard, you are mad," she screamed, her voice like a knife, stabbing my heart. "You will destroy yourself for this witch." Renard spun around, his sword tip pointed at her, his voice like thunder, "Silence, Cassandra." His gaze was a knife, piercing her pretense. "You are my father's pawn, not my fiancé. My life belongs to Elise." Cassandra's face twisted, as if shattered by his words. She turned to Victor, whispering softly, a glint of conspiracy in her eyes. Victor nodded, a cold sneer on his lips. "Take them," he commanded, his voice like a death knell. "Renard, you will pay for your treachery." Guards rushed us. Renard swung his sword, but his wounds slowed his movements. I tightly gripped my cloak, the letter's weight burning on my chest. I lunged for Renard, trying to shield him from a guard's sword, but the remnants of the shackles dragged me down, and I fell. Renard roared, "Elise, get back." He forced a guard back with his sword, blood gushed from his shoulder, staining my skirt. In the confusion, I saw my reflection in the copper mirror, Renard's figure swaying, my face twisted and pale, like a prophecy of doom. I struggled to my feet, the letter's secret wrestling in my heart. Handed over, perhaps save Renard, hide it, and we might both burn. Victor's gaze was like a viper, fixed on me, as if he could read my hesitation. Suddenly, a tremendous crash sounded from outside the cell, as if the castle's stone gate had been shattered. The guards froze, Victor's face went pale. Renard seized the opportunity, pulling me toward the doorway, roaring, "Run, Elise. We still have a chance." But Cassandra stood blocking the exit, a dagger in her hand, her eyes flashing with madness. "You won't escape, Elise," she screamed, the dagger glinting coldly in the firelight. "Renard is mine. You will die here." I gripped Renard's hand, my heart pounding like a drum. The letter's weight was a mountain, crushing my breath. Renard's figure flickered in the firelight, like a candle in the wind, ready to be extinguished at any moment. Could we break through this prison, or would we be consumed by Cassandra's plot and the church's iron fist? Candle in the wind. December 1278, 7th night of the frost moon. The church's stone corridor was cold as an abyss. A biting wind snaked through the high window cracks, making the wall torches flicker and threaten to die. The light cast long, distorted shadows on the polished stone floor, like specters foretelling my fate. Though the shackles were broken, Cassandra's dagger still glittered in my mind, its cold gleam a viper's fang, reminding me that the hope of escape was fragile as a candle in the wind. Renard dragged me from the cell, rushing through the church's labyrinthine corridors, his blood dripping onto the flagstones, marking a scarlet trail for our flight. The letter remained tucked inside my cloak, pressed against my chest, a spark ready to ignite, bearing the secret of the royal bloodline. Yesterday's chaos felt like a nightmare. Renaud's sword light cut through the darkness, repelling the guards, but Cassandra's threat lingered like a shadow. She stood at the cell door, dagger in hand, her eyes burning with frenzied jealousy. "You won't escape, Elise." Her words were a curse, stabbing my heart. I didn't know how Renaud broke free of the guard's siege, only that he pulled me into the night, blood streaming from his shoulder, staining my hand. His breath was ragged, yet his grip was firm, like an unyielding flame in the gale. We sought refuge in a secluded chamber deep within the church, where the air was damp and acrid, mixed with the smell of scorched wax and moldy stone. Renaud leaned against the door, gasping, his armor gleaming coldly in the candlelight, the holy knight's sigil obscured by blood, a symbol of his broken oath. His face was etched with exhaustion, yet his eyes burned with resolute fire. He whispered, "Elise, we have little time left. The church guards will find this place soon." I sank onto the stone floor, my cloak cold and damp, clinging to my skin like a second set of fetters. The weight of that letter suffocated me, the secret of the royal bloodline, enough to topple the power of the church and the old duke, yet also capable of destroying Renaud. I looked up, the candlelight reflecting on his face, his chiseled features carved with traces of blood and sweat. "Renaud, why won't you abandon me?" I asked softly, my voice hoarse and trembling. "You have already betrayed too much for my sake." He abruptly crouched down, gripping my wrist with a force that made me wince. His fingers were cold, yet they seared my skin like fire. "Abandon you?" he roared, his voice like thunder, making the candlelight tremble. "Elise, you are my queen. To abandon you is to abandon myself." His gaze was like a knife, piercing my defenses, holding a heat I could not bear. My heart nearly burst from my chest, tears streamed down, scalding my cheek like drops of hot wax. I wanted to push him away, yet found myself gripping his hand tightly, my nails digging shallow marks into his skin. "Renaud, you don't understand," I whispered, my voice almost breaking. "That letter, it will ruin everything. The church will not spare me, and your father will not spare you." He smiled, a poignant, gentle smile. His hand slid to my cheek, softly wiping away the tears, his touch as delicate as if handling fragile treasure. "Let me ruin everything," he murmured, his voice a vow, heavy and firm. "I came for you, even if it means opposing God." His words were like a raging fire, consuming my sanity. I closed my eyes, feeling his breath on my forehead, carrying the scent of blood and pine. The candlelight danced between us, as if crowning this forbidden passion. I wanted to tell him the full truth: my mother's affair with the prince, my lineage, the duke's treachery, but Cassandra's shadow coiled in my heart like a viper. Her schemes were a dark current, threatening to swallow us whole at any moment. Suddenly, a low sound of footsteps and the clash of metal came from outside the chamber. Renaud quickly rose, sword in hand, the blade gleaming coldly in the candlelight. "Hide," he hissed, his voice regaining the Knight Commander's authority. "Don't make a sound." I retreated to the chamber's corner, leaning against the cold stone wall, the candlelight casting my shadow, warped and vulnerable. Renaud stood before the door, his body a bulwark between me and the threat. The footsteps grew closer, urgent and heavy, like the drumming of death. Suddenly, the door was pushed open, and Cassandra entered. Her golden hair shimmered like molten gold in the candlelight, but her eyes burned with the fire of jealousy. She held a dagger in her hand, her skirt sweeping the floor with a slight rustle, like the trace of a serpent. "Renaud, you truly are incorrigible," she sneered, her voice sweet yet poisonous. "You will ruin yourself for this witch?" She approached, the dagger glittering in the candlelight, like fate's sharp blade. Her gaze swept over me, as if inspecting a piece of filth. "Elise, do you think he will protect you forever? Once he knows your full secret, he will personally send you to the pyre." I bit my lip, feeling the letter's weight pressing like a mountain on my heart. "Cassandra, you are jealous of me," I whispered, my voice trembling yet defiant. "But you cannot change his heart." She laughed, a proud and cruel sound. "His heart?" She moved closer to me, spinning the dagger in her hand, the candlelight dancing on the blade. "Renard is mine, Elise. You are merely a lure, a witch destined to burn." Renard suddenly stepped forward, pointing his sword at her, his voice like thunder. "Silence, Cassandra." His gaze was a knife, piercing her facade. "You are my father's pawn, but you will never be my fiancée. My life belongs to Elise." Cassandra's face twisted, as if shattered by his words. She turned to me, abruptly raising the dagger, pointing it at my chest. "Then let her die," she shrieked, her voice a knife, stabbing my heart. Renard lunged at her. His sword flashed once, knocking the dagger to the ground with a loud clank, sending it rolling out of the candlelight. Cassandra stumbled back, a flicker of fear in her eyes, quickly turning to madness. She roared, "You will regret this, Renard. The church guards are on their way. You won't escape." Renard seized my hand, rushing toward a hidden passage deep within the chamber. His blood dripped onto the stone floor, marking a scarlet trail for our escape. The passage was narrow and damp, the air filled with the smell of mold and earth. The candlelight was left behind only darkness, and his hand, warm and firm, guided me forward. "Renard, where are we going?" I whispered, my voice echoing in the passage like a ghost's murmur. "Somewhere safe," he whispered, his breath ragged. "But we must hurry. Victor's ambush could be upon us any moment." The passage ended at a wooden door. Renard pushed it open. A blast of cold wind hit us, carrying the sting of snowflakes. We burst into the snowy night. The dark shadows of the pine forest swayed around us, like countless prying eyes. Renard pulled me along, his steps unsteady, the wound on his shoulder still bleeding, staining the snow. A countdown to our fate. Suddenly, the sound of hoofbeats and the gleam of torches appeared in the distance, flickering through the snowy woods. The church guards. Their shouts were like a wolf's howl, shattering the night's silence. I gripped Renard's hand, my heart pounding. The weight of the letter burned on my chest. Should I tell him the whole truth? Or continue to hide it, until we found true safety? Renard stopped, turning to face me. Tears glittered in his eyes, like a candle in the wind, faint yet fiery. "Elise, no matter tonight's outcome," he whispered, his voice a solemn vow. "You are my queen." I collapsed into his embrace, my tears falling, scalding his armor like snowflakes melting in fire. "Renard, I will follow you to the end," I whispered, my voice almost broken. "Even to death." The hoofbeats grew nearer, the firelight dancing in the snowy woods like the eyes of death. Renard tightened his grip on his sword, shielding me, blood dripping from his shoulder, staining the snow. Could we break through the church's ambush, or would we be consumed by Cassandra's plot? The price of treason. December 1278, 8th day of the frost moon. The church's hall of judgment was like a cold tomb. Stone pillars soared, supporting the carved deity figures on the vaulted ceiling. Those stone eyes coldly looked down on me, as if my fate had already been sealed. Flames crackled in the braziers, casting long shadows that twisted on the polished stone floor, like our fractured hopes. Though the iron shackles were gone, my wrists still bore red, swollen marks, like the brand of destiny. The letter, tucked inside my cloak, pressed against my chest, a spark ready to ignite, bearing the secret of the royal bloodline, the truth capable of toppling the kingdom. Last night's escape was a phantom dream. Renard dragged me through the church's secret passage. The torchlight and hoofbeats in the snowy woods were death's pursuit. But Cassandra's plot, like a dark current, dragged us back to this abyss of judgment. Guards swarmed like wolves. Though Renaud's sword flashed fiercely, it was no match for the church's iron hand. We were dragged onto the platform, shoulder to shoulder, facing the wrath of the church and the old duke. His blood still stained my skirt, a scarlet vow marking our forbidden love. The hall was packed. The rustle of nobles' silks and the clank of knights' armor mingled with whispers that hissed like serpents. The church's crimson banner slightly trembled in the air, like a curtain woven from blood. Judge Victor stood on the high platform, his black robe shrouding his gaunt frame, clutching the letter fragment seized from the cell, his eyes gleaming with a mix of piety and ambition. His voice rang out like a death knell across the hall, Elise, traitor and heretic. Renaud, sinner who betrayed the holy night vow. Today, you shall pay the price for treason. I bit my lip, forcing myself to look straight at him. Renaud stood beside me, his armor stained with blood and grime, the wound on his shoulder still seeping, staining the holy night sigil. His gaze was locked on me, deep as a winter lake, holding a heat I could not bear. I whispered, Renaud, we shouldn't have come to this. He turned his head, a flash of tenderness in his eyes, like a candle in the wind. Elise, as long as you are by my side, I will pay any price. His voice was low and firm, a vow to me and a challenge to the church. The old duke suddenly rose, his crimson cloak billowing like angry flames. His face was contorted with rage, his eyes burning with hatred for me. Renaud, you are mad, he roared, his voice like thunder, shaking the braziers. For this bastard, you betrayed your family, betrayed the kingdom. She is a cancer who must burn. A murmur broke out in the crowd. Nobles exchanged whispers, their eyes filled with scorn and curiosity. Cassandra stood beside the duke, her golden hair like molten gold in the firelight, but her eyes held a viper's cold glint. She slowly stepped forward, her skirt sweeping the floor with a slight rustle, like the trace of a serpent. Lord Victor, she said sweetly, her voice hiding venom. Renaud has been bewitched by this which his loyalty is gone. The church must purge all traitors. A chill ran down my spine. Cassandra's plot was a dark current, stirring up a greater storm. She wanted not only my life but Renaud's soul. I gripped my cloak, my fingers touching the outline of the letter. In that moment, I wanted to tear it up, to bury the truth forever, but Renaud's hand gently held my arm, warm and firm, like a lighthouse in the darkness. Elise, tell me the truth, he whispered, his voice so low only I could hear. No matter what that letter says, I will stand by you. My heart pounded, tears streamed down, scalding my cheek like drops of hot wax. I closed my eyes, my mother's handwriting flashing in my mind, her forbidden love with the prince, my lineage, the duke's betrayal. All of it was a knife, stabbing my heart. I whispered, Renaud, if I speak, we will both die. He tightened his grip on my hand with a force that hurt. His eyes flashed with fierce resolve, like an unyielding candle in the wind. Then let us die together, he roared, his voice like thunder. But before we do, I want them to know the truth. Victor slammed the gavel down, the sound like a death knell, silencing the hall's uproar. Enough, he shouted, holding up the letter fragment. Elise, this fragment proves your crime. Hand over the complete letter, and perhaps we can still save Renaud's soul. The crowd surged, shouting like a tide. I felt my body tremble, not from fear, but from the letter's weight. It was not just my mother's last testament, but the kingdom's fracture. I looked at Renaud, his gaze like a knife, piercing my hesitation. Elise, speak, he urged softly, his voice gentle yet absolute. Let them know who you are. I took a deep breath, tears blurring my vision. I released my cloak, pulling the complete letter from its inner lining. The parchment was yellowed in the firelight, the ink like blood. I raised it high, my voice trembling yet firm. This letter proves my mother was a royal maid who had an affair with a prince. I am their descendant. My voice echoed through the hall, like a stone dropped into stagnant water, raising 1,000 ripples. The hall fell into instant silence, as if time had frozen. The nobles' whispers stopped, the brazier flames seemed to hold their breath. The duke's face turned crimson. He slammed his fist onto the stone table, shaking the braziers. Lies, he roared, his voice like thunder. This bastard defiled the royal family. Burn her. A flash of shock appeared in Victor's eyes, quickly turning into a cold sneer. Royal bloodline? He slowly stepped down from the platform, clutching the letter fragment. Elise, your lies will only hasten your death. He turned to the guards, shouting, "Seize her." Guards rushed forward, the clash of swords and firelight mingled, chaos surging like a tide. Renard swiftly pulled me behind him, drawing his sword, the blade gleaming coldly in the firelight. "Whoever dares touch her must face me first," he roared, his voice like thunder, shaking the hall's stone pillars. Cassandra shrieked, "Renard, you are mad." She rushed toward Victor, her eyes flashing with madness. "He has been bewitched by the witch. The church must purge him." I lunged for Renard, trying to grab his arm, but the guard's sword light drew nearer, like death's scythe. His blood dripped onto the stone floor, like red plum blossoms on snow. I gasped, "Renard, stop." But his figure was a mountain, shielding me from the guards, his sword cutting a cold arc, forcing back the approaching enemies. Suddenly, Victor held up the letter fragment, his voice like a death knell, "Renard, your treachery is exposed. The church's secret document proves you colluded with the enemy in the snowy woods." His words were like thunder, sending the hall into a frenzy. Nobles shouted, "Traitor!" Knights gripped their sword hilts, the atmosphere was a taut bowstring, ready to snap. I froze, a chill piercing my heart. The church's secret document? That was a forgery. Victor was framing Renard with a lie. I wanted to retort, but Renard abruptly turned, his gaze locked on me, tears shimmering in his eyes. "Elise, no matter what they say," he whispered, his voice like a candle in the wind. "I swear by my name as a knight, I protect my queen." My tears fell, scalding his armor like snowflakes melting in fire. I collapsed into his embrace, clinging to his cloak, my voice almost broken. "Renard, I won't let you die for me." But even my own words failed to convince me. Guards pressed closer, sword light forming a net. Cassandra's laughter, a viper's hiss, echoed through the hall. Suddenly, a tremendous crash sounded from the end of the hall, as if the castle's stone gate had been shattered. The crowd stirred, the guards froze, Victor's face went pale. Renard seized the opportunity, pulling me toward a side door, roaring, "Run, Elise. We still have a chance." But Cassandra's figure appeared in the doorway, clutching a new parchment scroll, her eyes flashing with triumph. "Did you think you could escape?" she sneered, her voice like a knife. "Renard, your treachery is undeniable. This secret document will ensure you and your witch burn together." I gripped Renard's hand, my heart pounding. The letter's secret was public, but the church's plot was a dark current, stirring up a greater storm. Could we break through this prison of judgment, or would we be consumed by Cassandra's document and Victor's iron fist? Salvation on the Snowfield. December 1278, 9th night of the frost moon. The snowfield wind cut like a knife, severing the night's silence. Snowflakes swirled, stinging my cheeks like the lash of fate, reminding me that the church's pursuit was a relentless shadow. Renard stumbled, pulling me through the pine forest. Our warhorses were lost in the chaos of the judgment hall, forcing us to rely on our feet against the endless cold. His armor was smeared with blood and snow, the wound on his shoulder still seeped, staining the snow behind us, a scarlet trace marking our flight. The letter remained tucked inside my cloak, pressed against my chest like a burning brand, bearing the secret of the royal bloodline, a truth capable of toppling the kingdom. Yesterday's judgment felt like a nightmare. Renard's sword light cut through the guard siege, leading me out of the church's hall. Cassandra's document, a venomous snake, bit at our hopes. Victor's cold sneer, a death knell, echoed in my heart. Yet, Renard's gaze, like candlelight, ignited my courage. We plunged into the snowy night, firelight and the thunder of hooves at our backs. The church's pursuers were like wolves, relentless in their chase. The dark shadows of the pines swayed around us, like countless prying eyes. Renard's steps grew heavy, blood bloomed on the snow, like red plum blossoms on white. I gripped his hand, its warmth was my only anchor. "Renard, we can't stop," I whispered, my voice trembling in the blizzard. "They will find us." He stopped, turning to face me. His face was etched with fatigue, yet his eyes burned with resolute fire. The candlelight had been left behind in the church chamber, now only starlight and the faint glow of snow outlined his chiseled features. "Elise," he roared, his voice hoarse yet firm. "If we die tonight, at least we loved." His words struck me like thunder, my heart nearly stopped. I collapsed into his embrace, tears falling, scalding his cold armor like snowflakes melting in fire. "Don't speak like that," I whispered, my voice almost broken. "Renard, we will live. I won't let you die for me." He smiled, a poignant, gentle smile. His hand slid to my cheek, softly wiping away the tears. His blood stained my skin, like the mark of destiny. "You are my only salvation," he murmured, his voice a candle in the wind, faint yet fiery. "No matter tonight's outcome, you are my queen." My heart twisted in agony, tears blurred my vision. I clung to his cloak, my nails digging into the rough fabric, trying to retain his warmth. The letter's weight crushed my breath, the secret of the royal bloodline, capable of both saving and killing us. I whispered, "Renard, I must tell you the full truth. The letter says my mother was a royal attendant who loved a prince. I am their descendant. Your father concealed the truth and branded me a bastard." He stiffened, shock and pain flashing in his eyes. He gripped my shoulders with a force that hurt. "You are the heir to the throne," he roared, his voice like thunder. "Elise, why didn't you say so sooner? This makes our peril greater." I bit my lip, tears fell, scalding the snow, instantly swallowed by the cold. "If I spoke, you would become the kingdom's enemy," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Renard, I would rather die myself than let you sacrifice for me." He pulled me fiercely into his embrace, the force stealing my breath. His armor was cold, stinging my skin, but his hug was a warmth in which I longed to drown. "I care not whose enemy I become," he roared, his voice a vow, heavy and firm. "Elise, I would rather oppose the entire kingdom than let you face the flames alone." The blizzard howled, snowflakes cutting our skin like knives. In the distance, hoofbeats sounded again, mixed with the flicker of torches, appearing intermittently through the snowy woods. My heart sank. The church's pursuit was faster than I imagined. Renard drew his sword, the blade gleaming coldly in the starlight, like a fissure in the night sky. "Hide behind the tree," he hissed, his voice regaining the Knight Commander's authority. "Don't make a sound." I shrank behind a pine, the rough bark pricking my palms, snowflakes piercing my cloak, cold as iron. I gripped the letter, trying to suppress my fear. Renard stood in the center of the snowfield, his blood bloomed on the white, like a countdown of fate. His figure was a mountain, shielding me from the pursuers, but I knew his wound was rapidly weakening him. The torchlight drew nearer. 3 masked guards burst from the trees, their cloaks embroidered with the church's red cross, swords gleaming in the snowy night. Renard met them with his blade. The clash of steel was an ear-splitting sound, like the low roar of a storm. He fought 3 against 1, his movements still nimble, but every swing of the sword brought forth more blood from his shoulder. I clenched my teeth, tears falling, scalding the cold snow. Renard! I cried out, my voice swallowed by the blizzard. I wanted to rush out and help him, but my legs felt weighted with lead, unable to move. A guard's sword sliced his arm, blood gushed, staining the snow. Renard grunted, falling to one knee, his sword plunged into the snow, the only thing supporting his will. Unable to bear it any longer, I rushed from behind the tree and threw myself toward him. Snowflakes lashed my face, but I saw only his figure, flickering like a candle in the wind. "Don't come near," he roared, his voice hoarse yet commanding. "Elise, run. I won't leave you." I screamed, my voice tearing my throat. I knelt beside him, pressing my hands against his wound, trying to stop the flow of blood. His blood was hot as fire, staining my hands, a coronation of our vow. I tore a strip from my cloak, tightly wrapping his arm. The smell of blood mixed with the scent of pine, acrid yet reassuring. The guards closed in, their sword light forming a net around us. Renard struggled to his feet, shielding me behind him, raising his blade once more, a challenge to destiny. "You want her life, you must kill me first," he roared, his voice like thunder, shaking the falling snowflakes. Suddenly, a familiar figure emerged from the snowy woods, Cassandra. Her golden hair shimmered like molten gold in the firelight, but her eyes held a viper's cold gleam. She rode a black horse, clutching a parchment scroll, a victorious sneer on her lips. "Renard, you truly are a fool," she mocked, her voice like a knife. "You will destroy yourself for this witch?" I gripped Renard's hand, my heart pounding. Cassandra's arrival was a dark current, stirring up a greater conspiracy. She held up the parchment. The firelight revealed the writing, the church's secret document, the forged evidence, enough to brand Renard a traitor. "This document proves your collusion with the enemy," she said sweetly, her voice hiding venom. "Hand over Elise, and perhaps the church will spare your life." Renard laughed, a poignant, resolute sound. "Cassandra, you will never understand," he roared, his voice a candle in the wind. "Elise is my queen. My life belongs to her." He turned to me, tears shimmering in his eyes. "Elise, run. Don't look back." I shook my head, tears falling, scalding the snow. "I won't leave you," I whispered, my voice almost broken. "Renard, we face this together." The guards closed in, sword light flashing like lightning, piercing the snowy night. Renard swung his sword, but his movements were slowing. Blood poured from his arm, staining the snow, the countdown of fate. I clung to the letter, my mother's handwriting flashing in my mind, the secret of the royal bloodline, capable of both saving and killing us. Should I reveal it now, or continue to hide it, until the very last moment? Suddenly, a tremendous crash sounded from the depths of the snowy woods, like a castle's horn. Firelight flickered in the distance, hoofbeats thundered, shaking the falling snowflakes. Cassandra's face went pale, a flicker of fear in her eyes. She roared, "Seize them! Don't let them escape!" But her voice was swallowed by the blizzard, like a whisper of fate. Renard seized my hand, rushing toward the depths of the snowy woods. His blood bloomed on the snow, marking the final path of our escape. Could we break through the church's siege, or would we be consumed by Cassandra's document? Crown of Destiny. December 1278, 10th day of the frost moon. The castle hall's cold pierced my bones like a knife. Stone pillars soared, supporting the carved royal crest on the vaulted ceiling. The golden lions glittered in the candlelight, mocking my humble birth. The crimson royal banner slightly trembled in the air, like a curtain woven from blood, foreshadowing the judgment of my fate. Renard stood beside me, his armor smeared with blood and snow. The wound on his shoulder still bled, staining the holy night sigil. His hand tightly held mine, warm and firm, like a lighthouse in the darkness, igniting the last hope in my heart. Yesterday's escape on the snowfield was a nightmare. The church's pursuers were like wolves. Cassandra's document, a venomous snake, bit at our hopes. Yet, Renaud's vow, like a candle, burned through my fear, leading us through the siege to the very core of the royalty, the castle hall. I revealed the secret of the royal bloodline. The ink of that letter thundered, shaking the kingdom. Nobles whispered, the church's authority wavered, but the old duke's and Victor's wrath, like fire, vowed to burn us to ashes. The hall was packed. The rustle of nobles' silks and the clank of knights' armor mingled with whispers that hissed like serpents. On the central high platform, the throne stood empty, like the suspense of destiny. Victor stood beside the platform, his black robe like the wings of night, clutching the forged document, his eyes glittering with ambition. The old duke, my father, stood beside him, his crimson cloak billowing like angry flames, his eyes burning with hatred for me. Cassandra stood in the crowd, her golden hair like molten gold in the candlelight, a victorious sneer on her lips, as if she already foresaw our destruction. Victor raised the forged document, his voice ringing out like a death knell across the hall. Elise, traitor and heretic. Your lies are exposed. This document proves Renaud's collusion with the enemy. You shall pay the price for treason. I bit my lip, feeling the letter's weight still on my chest. The complete letter was revealed, but Victor's forgery was a sharp blade, stabbing Renaud's loyalty. I looked at him, his gaze locked on me, deep as a winter lake, holding a heat I could not bear. Renaud, they are lying, I whispered, my voice trembling. That document is a forgery. He tightened his grip on my hand with a force that hurt. His eyes flashed with fierce resolve, like an unyielding candle in the wind. I know, Elise, he murmured, his voice a vow. No matter what they say, you are my queen. The duke slammed his fist onto the stone table, shaking the braziers, casting distorted shadows on the stone floor. Renaud, you are mad, he roared, his voice like thunder. This bastard is the kingdom's cancer. You betrayed your family, betrayed the crown for her. She must burn. The crowd surged, shouts pouring in like a tide. Nobles shouted, traitor. Knights gripped their sword hilts. The atmosphere was a taut bowstring, ready to snap. I felt my body tremble, not from fear, but from the familiar shame. For years, I had survived in the castle's shadows, enduring my father's cold shoulder and insults. Now, he wanted to erase my existence with fire. Cassandra slowly stepped forward, her skirt sweeping the floor with a slight rustle, like the trace of a serpent. Lord Victor, she said sweetly, her voice hiding venom. Elise's bloodline is a lie. She bewitched Renaud, bewitched the kingdom. The church must purge her. I clung to Renaud's hand. Tears streamed down, scalding my cheek like drops of hot wax. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling yet firm. Cassandra, you are wrong. My bloodline is no lie. I pulled the complete letter from inside my cloak, raising it high in the candlelight. The parchment was yellowed, the ink was like blood. This letter proves my mother was a royal attendant who loved a prince. I am their descendant, the heir to the throne. The hall fell into instant silence, as if time had frozen. The nobles' whispers stopped, the brazier flames seemed to hold their breath. Victor's face paled, a flicker of fear in his eyes, quickly turning into a cold sneer. Lies, he shouted, holding up the forged document. Your letter is but a witch's trick. Renaud, do you still dare to defend her? Renaud swiftly stepped forward, drawing his sword, the blade gleaming coldly in the candlelight. I swear by my name as a knight, I protect my queen, he roared, his voice like thunder, shaking the hall's stone pillars. Victor, your document is a forgery. The church's conspiracy is exposed. A gasp erupted in the crowd. Knights gripped their sword hilts. The church guards' hands went to their weapons. The atmosphere was a low growl before a storm, ready to break. The duke charged at Renaud, his eyes burning with fury. "You are my son, yet my greatest enemy." His voice was like thunder, threatening to extinguish the flickering candles. I lunged for Renard, trying to grab his arm, but the guards surged forward, sword light forming a net around us. Renard shielded me behind him, his sword cutting a cold arc, forcing back the approaching enemies. His blood dripped onto the stone floor, like red plum blossoms on snow. I gasped, "Renard, stop. We can't die like this." He turned to me, tears shimmering in his eyes, like a candle in the wind. "Elise, I would rather die than let you live alone." His voice was low and gentle, a vow to me and a challenge to fate. Suddenly, a group of knights burst into the hall, their armor gleaming in the candlelight, led by a young noble wearing the royal lion crest. His voice was resonant, echoing through the hall, "Halt! The church's conspiracy is exposed. Elise's bloodline is verified. She is the legitimate heir to the throne." The crowd surged, nobles exchanged whispers, the church guards froze. Victor's face was pale, the forged documents slipped from his grasp, like a lie exposed. The Duke staggered back, a flicker of despair in his eyes. Cassandra shrieked, "Impossible. She is a witch." But her voice was drowned by the crowd's clamor, like a fading flame in the wind. Renard seized my hand, rushing toward the high platform. His blood dripped onto the stone steps, marking a scarlet path for our victory. He raised my hand high, his voice like thunder, "Elise is my queen, and the kingdom's hope." His gaze swept the hall, locking onto the Duke and Victor. "Your era is over." Victor spun around, attempting to flee toward a side door, but the young noble's knights surrounded him. Cassandra charged at the Duke, her eyes flashing with madness. "We still have a chance. Kill her." She drew a dagger, lunging for me, the blade gleaming in the candlelight, like fate's sharp edge. Renard swiftly pulled me behind him, his sword flashed once, knocking the dagger to the ground with a loud clank, sending it rolling out of the candlelight. I gripped his arm, tears falling, scalding his armor. "Renard, don't let her destroy us," I whispered, my voice almost broken. He turned to me, tears shimmering in his eyes, like a candle in the wind, faint yet fiery. "You are my queen, and my salvation," he murmured, his voice a vow. "Elise, I will crown you, even if it means opposing the entire kingdom." Suddenly, a tremendous crash sounded from the end of the hall, as if the castle's stone gate had been breached. Firelight flickered outside the door, hoofbeats thundered, threatening to extinguish the candles. The Duke's and Victor's guards rushed into the hall, the clash of swords and firelight mingled, chaos surging like a tide. Cassandra's laughter rang out amidst the clamor, like a serpent's hiss, "You won't escape. The church's iron hand never fails." I gripped Renard's hand, my heart pounding. The letter's secret was public, the kingdom's tremor was a storm, but the final siege by the Duke and Victor was a dark current, stirring up a greater crisis. I stood on the high platform, facing the empty throne, feeling the weight of destiny on my shoulders. I was the royal heir, but could I bear the price of this crown? Renard's figure swayed amidst the guard's siege, blood dripped onto the stone floor, marking the final path for our future.